Well, good afternoon or good morning to everyone on this, our final webinar of the 2025 TSAMM's Angel Tree Module webinar series. Special congratulations to those of you that have been able to attend all six. We're here on our last one. We've walked through campaign settings, applicant management, angel management, distribution management, all other managements, as well as we spent some time on Tuesday talking about our new features that are new for the 2025 season. And here we are with our, I would say like the most narrow webinar, but I would say one of the most important webinars, and that is a conversation, an instruction on the integration that TSAMM's Angel Tree has with Community Services by WellSky. The relationship with WellSky between Data Paradigm and WellSky goes back many years. We work very closely with them. I speak with their team almost on a weekly basis as we go through continuing to expand and evolve the integration. In my time as an officer and in my conversations with caseworkers, one of the most frustrating things about the services the Salvation Army provides from a caseworker's perspective isn't lack of funding or challenging clients. It is the perception of wasted time as we swivel chairs. We go from one system to another and just simply re-enter the same information in one system and then another and another. And I'll be the first to say that this integration isn't perfect, but it cuts down significantly on the needs and the efforts of your staff to go and look up, to create services and community services, and because there are assessments, things like that, that may or may not take place as a part of your workflow. But here we're trying really hard to make sure that we can mitigate and limit those issues as much as possible, creating as much time in a season where time is extremely valuable. And so what we're going to talk about today is really kind of two sides. We're going to talk about the community services match process, and that is where most of your work is done. And believe it or not, that also, and we'll talk about this, is where some of the biggest challenges can occur. And this is where we have to get a one-to-one relationship of everyone in the Angel Tree module into community services. In order for this connection to work, those matches must take place. And as we've gone back, we've had some form of integration with the system going back, I think it's 4 years now, and it's slowly evolved each year, trying to help mitigate some of the, for lack of a better term, bad data that occurs, trying to cut down some of the effort and the work and therefore the cost for doing certain functions. And we're going to talk about some changes this year to really try to cut down on some of that bad data that we've seen in the past few years. And it's all been centered, almost all of it has been centered around this match process. So we're going to talk through a few scenarios. We're actually going to go into the WellSky interface. Now, hopefully you'll have some grace with me, as I am not the expert in that world, but I know enough to be able to navigate and show you what we're looking for, right? And so we're going to be able to go through and show you how we can accurately make those matches to have the best data possible. We're going to talk briefly about a brand new permission this year, centered around the whether or not someone has the authority to perform that community services match. In previous seasons, that match process was able to be done by anybody with access to the record. This year, that functionality is limited to those with administrative rights and those that have specifically been given that can perform community services match. We're going to touch on that. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the configuration implications of the system, how the system works, where you configure your seasonal programs and those default values, and then ultimately how we send those services over to WellSky. Now, I will say right off the bat, because we have representatives from the Western Territory and we have representatives from the Central Territory, and there are different flows, there are different systems, there are different business rules between those two territories. And so the Western Territory has a few more options, and so that's actually where we're going to walk through the system today. If you have questions specific to the Central Territory, by all means, I will try to answer those, and we can even jump around if we need to try to show you that in a different system to see how it will look just a little bit different. But for the most part, I don't think anyone should have any issue taking this webinar that we're going through today and then applying it to your scenario in the Central Territory. All right, so let's jump first into this WellSky match process. We're not going to talk about configurations. We're not going to talk about permissions. Let's just talk about the match process. Now, I'm going to perform that on each one of the applicant detail pages, the applicant records. Right off the bat, we have this column here called Community Services Match. By the end of the season, before you're getting ready to close out and spend some nicely earned time with family or go on a trip at the end of the season, you're going to want to look at this column of data, Community Services Match. What this tells me right off the bat is what applicants do I still need to perform this match on. We talked about struggling data last year, and one of the things that happened is people would finish their season, they would post services to WellSky, they would send them via API, but only half of their applicants had been matched. And so what happens is like we didn't get all the data. And when it comes to, and we'll talk about this when we get to the services side, but you kind of get one shot, right? We're going to send the data once. You can't then go back in and say, well, now I want to send these other 10 records. And so there's some needs there to make sure this is set. There's a filter for that. So I can go under filter, go to Community Services Match. And in this case, I only want to look at those that are marked as no, those that don't have a Community Services Match in place. And you can see that I have 5 individuals that fall into that category. Now, I've set up 3 different scenarios to take place, or 4 really, right? And so we're going to walk through these different scenarios that you will see in Community Services Match process. So let's jump into Nevada Brooks applicant page. The first thing I do is when I get here, I can see this Start Applicant Match button. You will see this button if the match hasn't been performed. If it has been performed, you'll see the household ID and the client ID as you can see in question. Now, as we mentioned before, this button this year will only appear to those that have been given the Can Perform Community Services Match and those with Can Manage Angel Tree, the administrator permission. As you roll out this season, I'll show you where you can alter that permission, but that is by default off. So for those locations that are using this integration, if you go into the system, no one besides those with administrative rights are going to be able to perform this match, and that is intentional. We don't want anyone performing an act that is incorrect. So let's perform the match, right? So we're going to walk through a few scenarios. In this case, I'm going to open up Nevada Brooks. And what the system is doing is it's looking in, it's passing in the first name, the last name, and the date of birth. And it's going to say, here are all the options of applicants that fit these criteria. Now, you can see here at the bottom, we got a match. Nevada Brooks, born on August 7th, 1987, who's in household 385 and client 1114, right? So this is what you would anticipate seeing a lot of the time, especially with those returning individuals. I will say this is looking for an exact match. So if this person had a different last name, but it was Nevada with that same date of birth, it's not going to bring back those results. And we'll talk about what we can do with that in a second. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, oh, this is Nevada. I'm going to select. When I click select, it's going to bring back all of the household members for Nevada. In this case, we have Nevada, Holly, and Brooks. And the system is automatically going to anticipate and apply the correct client ID here with this drop down here. Now, I can choose to update that however I see fit. We'll talk about what it means to create new there in a second. But in the end, All I'm doing with this applicant is I'm just storing the client and household ID in Angel Tree. In a second here, when I go to click save, all I've done is save the client IDs to the household member specified. I haven't done any data updates into community services. There's been no what's called a post. I have not placed any data in community services. All I've done is done a match. Now you can see when I've done so, I now have a community services household ID of 385 and the ID for this applicant of 1114. If for some reason I need to update that, maybe there were 2 Nevada Brooks that came back, and because you're in the process of cleaning up that data on your side, I can just click this edit pencil and I can go back and redo that process, right? So that is the happy path. That is the happy path. That is the person that exists in community services also exists in Angel Tree, and everyone exists in both places, right? That is the happiest path we can go down. Now, let's go down a path that's still pretty happy, but has a few wrinkles to it. And I'm going to go into Kyle here. Kyle Orton, a former quarterback for my Chicago Bears. I come in here, I'm going to do a start an applicant match. Now, the same thing is going to apply. It's going to pass in the Kyle, first name Kyle, last name Orton, born on January 1st, 1990. We brought back one of those records, Kyle Orton, household client. I'm ready to double check to move forward, right? In this case, I'm going to click select, and you're going to see something that happens here. You can see here that Susan Orton, born in 97, is not a part of the household in community services. So let's talk a minute to see what we're seeing down here. We've passed in, we got the household member information from community services, and in WellSky, I have Kyle Orton and I have Brian Orton. I'm going to pause here and I'm going to say this multiple times over the course of this webinar. The words create new need to not be taken lightly. Create new is going to create a record, in this case for Susan Orton, in community services. And this is where our bad data happens. People were too quick to click create new in previous season. They weren't accurately seeing this person exists. They weren't double checking. They weren't doing those things to make sure they were in both places. It's still saving you gobs of time, even if it takes the extra 90 seconds to go over to community services and check. So all I would need to do if I'm doing this match, I could go into community services, go to my client, and I'm just going to do a quick search on Orton. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to do a quick search on Orton. I see Kyle, I see Brian, but I don't see any other Orton in place. So at this point, there's a reasonable expectation that Susan is going to be new to community services, right? So I'm going to mark this person as create new. And when I click save, what's going to happen is the system is going to create Susan and place her in the household with Kyle and Brian. So let's take a quick peek into community services. Let's look at Kyle, right? So we have Kyle's account. If I go into Kyle's households, I can see here's a grandparent and child relationship between Kyle and Brian. It's a very young grandpa, right? And so this is obviously a test site here as we're going in, but that's our household, right? So let's come back. I'm going to take a look, go back to the client profile, and here I'm now going to click save. At this point, the system is creating Susan and updating Brian and Kyle. At this point, this application is done. Now let's take a quick peek at community services. Let's go back to the client. I'm going to search for Orton, but now see Susan is now over here. That's how quickly this data gets updated. But not only is Susan over here in the system, if I come into Kyle and I look at the households here, Susan is now in that household, right? So this is how quick that information gets updated. Obviously, in the throes of the season, there could be a 5-second delay. But for all intents and purposes, it is an instantaneous change from Angel Tree to community services. But you also hopefully saw how easy that was, right? So let's talk about what happens if this person doesn't exist in the system. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to go to my next applicant over here. And I'm going to go to Julio Orson. Now, Julio, when I'm going to do the match, it's going to bring back no matches found. And I think I'm projecting, but I believe what took place is people in the system would see no matches found and simply go up, create new. That was the easiest thing for them to do, right? It literally took them about 6 seconds to go from seeing no matches found to finding the button to click. But here's where the difficulty arises. We're passing in the first name, last name, date of birth. Julio Orson, December 15th, 1993. So let's come back to community services, go back to our clients, and now I'm going to look for the last name Orson. Well, there's not a Julio Orson, but there is a Julian, right? Did someone mistype something? I can go to Julian and I can say, okay, here's Julian. Let's look at his household. Okay, Julian's in a household with Bruno and Zorita. Let me take a look at my applicant. I'm going to cancel out of this just so I can take a quick peek. Let me look at the angels, right? Oh, it's Zorita and Bruno. All signs point that this client here, Julian Orson, is what an angel tree is Julio Orson. Maybe they mistyped their birth date. Maybe they went by their middle name as opposed to their last name. Unfortunately, what doesn't happen a lot is we don't see the data being updated, right? They might look at the driver's license, they might look at the residency, but not actually come back and update this applicant's information. Now, I can do two things. I can go in and I can update the applicant's information by clicking the edit pencil here on the right and update it from Julio to Julian, right? And at which point that person will come back no problem. I can also say, listen, in the end, like, I'm not going to update. I would say that's the right way. But let's say we're under a time crunch. I have the option to search, right? So there's no matches. So rather than clicking create client, if I click this button, again, really easy, I'm now going to have 2 Brunos and 2 Zoritas and a Julio and a Julian, right? I've got bad data. I've got duplicated data in my system. Instead, I'm going to click refine search. Now I can do a couple things. I can type in, right, Julian Orson with the birth date. But if I've already gone into WellSky, I don't want to type. I don't have to look back away. What was the date of birth? I don't remember. I can come over here and say, oh, Julian's client 1121. I can just come right here, 1121, search. Oh, there he is, no problem. I'll click select. I'll come over here, right? Julio still doesn't match with Julian, so we're going to default to a create new. But the other 2, Zorita and Bruno, match perfectly, so they pre-populate. All I do is say, listen, I know they don't line up exactly, but I know that this angel tree individual is this community services individual. So I just go to the drop down, change it to 1121, click save. And now I've done a perfect match. There's no bad data, there's no duplicated data. And now when we're ready to send Julio over into the system, we are squared away and it is good to go. Now, and when we're ready to create new, let's go ahead, let's jump back down here to Gary DeLance, right? Do an applicant match, no matches found. I do my research, I go over into the system, oh, there's no DeLance, I'm good to go. I'm just gonna create a new household. Proceed. This one takes, depending on the size of the household, might take a few seconds, right, as it cycles through each individual. But in this case, we're done, right? Gary DeLance has been created. The angels have been created that are here. Richie and Sheila. Let's see if there's any household members, of which I think in this one there are none. All right, there's no non-angel records. But it was that easy for me to create a record in community services. And then I'm ready to move on to the next one, and I can cycle back through. I can do those things. If you haven't done so yet, please use the questions. I'm going to answer most, if not every single one of your questions on the call because this is the most nuanced bit here. But please have patience with me as I'm not a WellSky expert. There's probably WellSky experts on this call from division and territorial headquarters that you'll want to reach out to for other data. But by all means, I'll do my best to answer the questions. So that is the applicant match process. Again, of this whole process of everything we're going to talk about over this entire webinar, this is the most important aspect of what you're going to do. Do not, in an effort to go fast, just go ahead and click create new, create new, create new, create new. Because yes, at the end of the season, you're going to transfer a bunch of data over, but the net effect is that those individuals, those systems that you tried to send are going to end up creating bad data and actually create more work for those divisional and territorial individuals and maybe even yourself, right? So let's try to take an extra few seconds here at the beginning to make sure that match process happens and is done fully. All right, before I talk about these values here, we need to jump into the configuration side, right? So we talked about this side here. Now let's go into our campaign settings. Now, new to our campaign settings is this external systems tab. If you recall last year, all of our WellSky integration was kind of in the seasonal programs. They're still a part of that, but now it's going to be configured in a combination of seasonal programs and external systems. Let's go to seasonal programs first. In seasonal programs, I have the ability to create whatever options I want, and then but hard-coded into the system is a certain number of options. We're in the Western Territory. These are the Western Territory options. This is where you need to put your creative hat on just a little bit and understand that in the Central Territory, you've got a few less options, right? You don't have as many options, but this is what's in place between the Western Territory. If you go into your Angel Tree system now, you'll be able to see what's in place for the Western Territory. Additionally, this next 3.5 minutes is only going to apply to the Western Territory. In the Western Territory, you guys utilize the unit value for each unit as a part of your gift in kind report at the end of the season. Inasmuch, we need to say what the default values are when we apply it. All right, so if I come to Christmas meals here, I might say, okay, the default unit is 1, and it's going to be $5 for each one, right? And if we go to holiday cash grants, we know that we have gift cards. So the default is going to be 1, but each one is $25, right? And so I can set those default values. You can see for our holiday gifts and toys, the default value is 2 at $40 for each unit, right? You can dictate the default values for each one, right? That is completely up to you. You can then further, I'm going to jump away from this just for a minute. You can then further clarify that on each applicant in question. So if I come back into our good friend Kyle here, we can see here certificate forms and assistance and holiday gifts and toys are checked and disabled. If they have at least one, everyone gets a certificate forms assistance, and if they have at least one angel, they will get holiday gifts and toys. But you know that they get 2 at 40 for each angel. And let's look at the angel information here. I can go look at this. Up there's 1, so we're good. But let's imagine that, or we can go to the applicant, that's okay. I can come here, I click this edit pencil, and I'm going to change this to 4. Because all I'm wanting to do is to dictate to the system that when you post the services, it's going to be 4. And we'll want to apply that out independently. So there's only 1 there, so we're going to set that at 2. And this is going to be applied to each person. So each one of those. So if I give a holiday cash grant, it's going to value at 1 at $25, right? And you'll do this for each one. If I want to change the value, if I want to do that, this is how I am able to manipulate that data. Again, if I go back seasonal programs, I turn these seasonal programs or these options for community service integration on in our seasonal programs tab. Please know that if just because I enable holiday enterprises here does not mean it applies to anyone. It is by default, if I come back to this record, let me refresh, it is by default off. It is not selected. So if I simply add a program in our seasonal programs here, as an administrator, if I just add that here, I'm just saying it's potential. I'm not actually stating whether or not someone received that at all. All right, so we're going to go ahead and remove this one here. And that's our seasonal programs. This is largely unchanged from last year. If you were in the Western Territory, this is what it looked like. If you were in the Central Territory, yours looked similar, just you don't have the default values function in place. Now let's jump to our new system called external systems. Now, if the community services match was extremely important from a caseworker point of view, this section here is extremely important from a WellSky administrator, not a WellSky, sorry, from an Angel Tree administrator point of view. When you look in this data, this is where I'm going to go to do two main things. I'll jump back to this in a second, but this is where I'm going to actually send the services to community services. This is where I'm going to make those changes and push those over, right? This is where, as I said, the magic happens and it sends it over. Additionally, I'm going to be able to come down here and see the transfer log of what's taken place. In this case, no services have been transferred yet, right? Here is where we get our service provider ID. I would say this is necessary to send services to do all the functionality within WellSky's community services. However, this is maybe the biggest however I've ever said on an Angel Tree webinar. Please talk with your divisional WellSky representative to make sure you put the correct provider in. Now, we have the ability to update providers after the fact. We can do that for you if for some reason things are incorrect. But we want to make sure our provider ID is going to the correct one. So let's come over here to WellSky, right? Let's go, and now you might not go here. I somewhat have administrative rights, but if I come here to search Egg Compton, these are the Compton services, right? We have emergency assistance, pathway of hope, seasonal assistance, right? So in the end, in order for me to send the correct data to the Compton Core seasonal provider ID, that should go to 1127. I come back here to my external systems tab and say, oh, we are good to go. If I need to change that, I click the edit pencil. I can change this to 450. I can click save. And now, right now, I've updated the system. If I post services, they are all going to be associated with service provider ID 450, which, as we just saw, is not the Compton seasonal assistance provider ID. So we're going to click edit, come here, 1127, click save. I will say this, 99.9% of you have your provider ID already configured, and it was given to us by territorial headquarters. If you want to take a quick peek, you can double check that. I understand things change over the course of the season, but this is where, if this is your first year using Angel Tree, there is the possibility that you weren't a part of the first data set that we got a few years ago. But just go ahead and look. If there's a missing provider ID, you'll see that there, but this is where you'll update that information. Okay, let me take a quick breath here for a second. And let's talk about posting services. I'm gonna deviate from my plan just a little bit here. I'm gonna answer a few questions. Alma, we got a question that basically asks two questions, right? One of which we do this for all families, and why do we need to match? And that is because think of it this way. If I wanted to Venmo or Zelle money to you, I need to both send the money and indicate who is the receiver of that money, right? So if I'm going to send money to Dan, I need to get Dan's specific. I can't just send it to Dan because there might be a lot of Dans on the Zelle or Venmo platform. and I want to send money to Dan. So I need to get Dan's specific user ID so that he specifically receives those services, right? Otherwise, we can't simply go off first name, last name, date of birth, because there may be multiple John Smiths that were born on a given day, or Eduardo Rodriguez's that were born on a given day. So this is how we will go ahead and apply that there. So this is really important that, yes, you must do that for all families. And in fact, new this year, hopefully you don't hate me, is you can't send services unless this is all complete. We now see a table here, but in last year, you would remember when we clicked finalize, you would see a list of complete and incomplete. And we expanded this out just a little bit to help you understand what exactly needs to be accomplished for me to perform these services, to send them over, right? And in order for me to send a service, 100% of the individuals need to be in the complete status. That doesn't mean approve. It doesn't mean that they were all distributed. It means that they are all in, to be complete. It says it right here. A complete household is one that's completed the match process, right? You've gone through what we just spent 20 minutes talking about. And the application is in a status of distributed or not delivered, right? It's going to be one of those two statuses. That marks it as complete. An incomplete household represents those that, even if they have a match, are in admin approved status, or they're in a status of distributed but not complete, right? So if we come over to our applicants, we've got lots of people that have community services match completed. Yes, 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 tons of them. But you'll see over here, their status is still admin approved, right? So I'm going to come in here to a feature we highlighted on Tuesday and a week ago Thursday, our bulk application update. I'm just simply going to come in here. I'm going to turn them all on. I'm going to mark them all to be distributed. Really simple. That's how quickly it is. All their statuses are updated. So now, if I come back to my campaign, I want to post some services. So let's go to our external systems tab. Now I've got 9. Oh, but I have 1 incomplete. I need to adjust this incomplete one. Why is it incomplete, right? Because he's in a distributed status, but if it's in the status of distributed, but the community service match is not complete, it's going to be marked as incomplete. It's going to be not complete. So let's go back one more time. We'll see how quickly this is. I'm going to come back to my applicant settings. I'm going to set my filter to no. Who did I miss? And in this case, Terry Paperchase did not have an applicant match. So I'll come in here, go ahead, no matches found. I've done my research. I've done what needs to be done. Yep, they're brand new. Let me go ahead and satisfy this match. And at this point, if I come back one more time to my services, I can come here and I'm saying, oh, I'm good. I don't have any in the incomplete. I have 10 households that are going to get the forms and assistance, 10 households receiving gifts and toys, 1 Christmas meal, and 1 holiday cash grant. Now, you are able to send services multiple times if there's a business reason to do so. Maybe you do multiple Christmas meals and people can come to multiple. You can come through and send those multiple times if that's necessary, right? So let's say, to start off with, all I want to do is send my Christmas meal. So I come here, I select the date that service occurred. Let's say my first holiday meal took place last Friday. When I'm ready, I click Send Services, right? I'm going to attempt to send 1 service to Community Services. Do I want to proceed? I click Send. At this point, it's all the magic happens behind the scenes. It uses what's called an API queue. It puts them in lists because that one button click that you did might have simultaneously created 3,000 services. You'd be surprised if you have simply 800 applicants that received 3 services each: holiday gifts and toys, certificate forms and assistance, and a Thanksgiving basket. Just those 3. One button click is going to trigger 2,400 services posted in the well sky. Now imagine how much time that's saving, right? If each one of those would have taken you even just a minute, right? That's 24,000 minutes that you just saved over the span of a very short time. Now, we come here, I've sent Christmas meals. Let's say I want to show you one other thing, because there are two that I'm not able to send twice. So here I got certificate forms assistance, holiday gifts and toys. We're going to set those as last Monday. I'm going to send the services, right? And now I've sent it. Now, all my other seasonal programs can be sent a second time if that's appropriate to do so. Holiday gifts and toys, certificate forms and assistance, if there's a reason to send those twice, reach out to me. Let's have a conversation. But me and my team and leadership, we tried really hard to understand, to see why there's any reason why I would send this more than once. There isn't. So to keep you from accidentally clicking a button, we turned it off, right? So here I can see the time sent are here. To my DHQ, THQ friends, if you want to see when services were sent, we now have a transfer log, right? So in the system, I can see that Lieutenant Jennifer Jones sent Christmas meals, certificate forms assistance, and holiday gifts and toys on this day at this time. And here's the number of records that were sent, right? We sent over 10. Remember, these two right here, these were sent with the same button click, right? So it's not that these were clicked 3 times. We did it at exactly the same time. When I come back in, if I want to finish this out and send services one last time, I can do one of two things. If I just click it now, it's going to send Christmas meals for a second time and then holiday cash grants. I can set that date. I can go back multiple months. So maybe you're coming in February, but we want this service to be applied in December because that's when the service took place, and we want our statistics to follow accordingly, right? So I can go back, I can select the date from the previous month, send those services, I'm sending 2, at which point now I can see I've sent each service once, I've sent Christmas meals twice. Again, I have my transfer log, I can see all the different times they were sent. So here's how all of the services get sent. When you are completed and you're ready to go, that's when you come over to finalize my campaign, and I would click finalize. Now, we do give you a warning here that says, hey, please ensure that all services have been transferred via the External Systems tab before finalizing your campaign, right? Because if you finalize without completing that transfer, it may result in incomplete or missing data in community services, right? So let's recap some of the changes for this year, and then I'll answer some questions, right? Number 1, we introduced a new permission, which is found under users. I realized I didn't tell you that, probably would be helpful. If I go under the user, there's now a permission here, can perform community services match. Now, Lieutenant Jones can, because they have the can manage angel tree. So if you have the administrator permission, I can do that without question. Otherwise, I have to have this permission in order to perform that match, right? That's one of the biggest change from the match side. Everything else from the match perspective is the same as last year. Hopefully we've just stressed well enough the importance of just not clicking create new, right? I know it's an easy button to click. It turns that no to a yes, which gives us all nice, warm, fuzzy feelings inside. But unfortunately, it's going to create some bad data, right? And we talk about how we configure what services are available, right? These are hard-coded into the system. Western Territory has theirs. Central Territory has theirs. For right now, they are not changeable, right? So but in the end, they're right here, and you can apply them, remove them. If you're from the Western Territory, you can update the default values, which of course you can change independently. And then when it comes time, we added in this external systems, which tells me the provider ID, gives me some context about who's complete and who's not. I have my transfer log. Okay, this has been a lot of information that's kind of been there. And so I'm going to answer some questions. I think some of you maybe joined this, joins our webinar here independent. So I'm going to answer some questions. I'll jump around as I can. So a question. Hopefully you found benefit in the service. So an individual asked, "What's the benefit of performing this match?" And so if let me double check here. I can maybe help you. So Lily, this right now is a service that's only available to the Central and the Western Territory. I can see on your email. Hopefully, hopefully you hear this, right? It is. I can see based on your email that you're from the Southern Territory. This is for connection to the community services, well sky integration there. We are in the process of building this out. So if you are a location in the Southern Territory that utilizes community services in its fullest capacity. I know that it's required for Pathway of Hope, but not every location uses it for broader case management. But if you are a location in the Southern Territory, I did get word that the API was turned on. That's not fully configured yet, but once that's there, you would be able to do these same things as long as you are a location that uses community services in the broadest sense. So let's talk about a few things here. There's a question. When you start the applicant match with, when you start a match with no match, can you refine the search and if any other info is needed? Yes, you absolutely can, right? So if I come into my applicant records, excuse me, apologies. I got timed out there as I jumped around and was spending some time away. So I'll get right back in there. But the answer is absolutely. You can refine your search. Let me share my screen one more time. All right, so you can refine your search, even though these have been distributed and there's not really a reason to update. If I come back into my good friend and former quarterback, Kyle Orton, if I come in, I can click refine the search. And this is where I can search by the first name, last name, date of birth, right? I have to search by all three. I can't just simply type in Smith and get every result back for Smith. It doesn't work. There's simply too many options. But you're going to search by the first name, last name, date of birth. This is going to be really beneficial for those individuals that maybe they're doing in-person intake and say, I know you've been here before, but like you can double check their driver's license, things like that. The best thing to do is if those type of misspellings occur, if they put in the wrong the wrong birth date, you're going to want to update that in the system. But that's up to you. Otherwise, I can simply get the client ID and grab that specifically. I can get just the exact number, as I said, like I can type in 1121 and get our good friend Julio or Julian and be able to match them that way. You see what other questions I have here? All right. Amy asks, can you please clarify, with implementing units this year, will it apply X units to holiday gifts and toys to the house adults as well as the eligible kids in the household? Amy, I can see from your email address that you are from the Central Territory. The units component of the WellSky integration is only available for the Western Territory. That's a business rule that the Central Territory has, that they don't gather that information in community services. Now, if I'm off base or if something has changed in the Central Territory, I will work with your territorial headquarters and my contacts there to manage that. But for right now, from the Central Territory, that is not a component. I do know the decision is when it comes to services being provided, they are being provided to all in the household, that I am able to gather those services across the board. Let me see if there's any other questions in here. All right, one question is, which fields are currently set up to be transferred for each client? Right now it's name, gender, race, veteran status, but that's not captured in this module. It is in another module. It's also going to capture the relationship to the head of household, right? So if you're creating a new household you'll be marked as the child or a spouse or a grandparent. That information is transferred. What just happened here? Sorry. Let's come back here. These hot corners from here on my Mac caught me. So if I come into my location here, let me go look back at Julian client. If I go to 1121. So it's creating generic information on here, right? So I know the date of birth, I know their age, their name, their gender, as it relates to the household. It'll capture the stuff. Oh, in case Bruno, we don't specify for the children, only for non-Angel household members. So if you remember when we did Susan, it brought it in as the wife, the spouse. So that's the information that comes over. It is intentionally vague. It is somewhat limited by the available data points that I'm allowed to transfer. That would work there. I got a question here that says, if I am the only person in the office who has access to WellSky, how can other people in the office who work in processing application perform the applicant match when there's a question about a new family member and there's a need to go into community services site? Well, that's a loaded question, Bernice, and if you're an officer, please forgive me. I'm not using the appropriate rank. Unfortunately, there's not an easy way to do that, but what you can do is via instructions, someone that you trust to follow this guideline, right? Because this is currently not a restriction, is you can say, okay, caseworker, or okay, person that is going to be helping me with Angel Tree this year, when you go in, I've given you that permission, but I don't want you to create any new. You can search, and if there's an exact match, do the match for me, right? If you've got 100 applicants, 50 or 60 of them probably are already in the system, right? So that person can handle those 50 and 60. They're not posting any data. They're only performing the match. And in that, they can confirm it, right? So first name, last name, date of birth, the correct household members, all those types of things. And you simply tell them that if it doesn't come back with a match, leave it, right? I can process these individuals all the way to be distributed without a match taking place, right? So if you don't have the time to go through and perform the matches at the beginning of the season, like, that's okay, right? The only thing that matters is when we go to post the services into WellSky at the end of the season. At the end of the season, those have to be in place. It won't let you send them if some of them are incomplete. One other difference for this year, forgive me, I should have highlighted this a little bit. I spoke on it in previous webinars, but we instituted a new status called not delivered, right? And so what that means is if an applicant was approved but never picked up their gifts, you can put them in not delivered. Last year, the system was looking for admin approved and distributed, because some people would finalize their campaign without ever putting them in a distributed status. And so, again, for the sake of data accuracy, we're leaning a bit in to be helpful. Jessica asks, can I transfer clients' data info from WellSky into Angel Tree, from WellSky into the Angel Tree app, or do I still need to input it all? Correct. Right now, this is a one-way street from Angel Tree to community services. There's not a mechanism in place to where you can go into community services and indicate that someone should be entered into TSAMM to Angel Tree. To be honest with you, Jessica, that's the first time someone's ever asked me that question. I've been doing this for a long time, and no one's ever asked me. That doesn't mean there's not a viable reason to do so. But we're going to need to explore that a little bit further to be able to better understand the use case and whether or not we want to go down that path. I will say in the world of custom software, we can do anything, right? If we have enough time to put things in place, or if there's enough need to warrant it to be put into place. So by all means, we'll look at those things if there's a reason to do so. Casey asked, just to clarify, the address is not a portion of the data that is being transferred. That is correct. The address is not a portion. If I come on here to my client record, the address is not in this basic client demographic. There's additional client info at the bottom, but right now the API is limited largely to this content at the very top. And so we're continually looking to expand that. But in our conversations with community services, there's some visibility restrictions or things along those lines. Forgive me if I'm stepping into it. There's some visibility guidelines and restrictions when it comes to addresses and things like that that maybe don't apply to others. But that's right now is in the place. I will say that we're continually looking to expand the possibility to transfer data, but right now that's not there. Casey asked about the veteran status. So veteran status is not a data point that we capture as a part of Angel Tree. It is a data point that we capture part of SA Help, and that's where it comes over. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions. Listen, as always, these webinars will be available on our YouTube channel here in probably the next 36 to 48 hours. Keep sending those questions in if you've got them. Use TSAMM or support at tsammm.org if you have any questions. By all means, we will help you along this process as best we can. Have a great rest of your day and season, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.